He worked beneath the pier where the sea forgot its names, counting shells instead of stars. Well, the sea can also have a cruel sense of humor. When some souls stop seeking adventure, they bury it, until it floats back. In the working-class port city of Baggy Wrinkle Bay, the rain was coming down in sheets this morning. But the slick, splattered docks were alive with activity nonetheless. The lumpers and rousers were hard at work, loading or unloading cargo, while the wharfmen directed traffic and ship hands threw lines to rest their vessels and wait along with everyone else making deliveries or peddling their wares. It was fascinating to witness such organized chaos, all deafened by the downpour of stinging precipitation. Though none of this concerned Muggsy. At least he tried not to think about it. Bent over and alone beneath everyone above, he was tending to his abalone farm, just 2 meters above the sea's darkened surface that meandered its way through the labyrinth of tall wooden barnacle-covered pillars which held aloft this noisy stretch of pier. This was where he worked. Drenched from the mess above and splashed from the salt below, he would walk the makeshift platforms, using the many ropes to haul up the algae-coated cages which soaked in the briny waters and were full of these snail-like creatures, each one suctioned to a small wall in their little compartments, filtering out a life until they were ready to be harvested and sold at the markets. Though this also didn't concern Muggsy. He just needed to clean their shells, wash the cages, and drop in a shovel of minced kelp as food. Then rinse and repeat as the day goes on. He preferred it this way. At least that's what he told himself. Staying busy meant less time for trouble. Although, the time alone also made way for intruding thoughts of his past. Of a life not dictated by routine, but by the currents and zephyrs of an open ocean. One day could be full of battle and plunder. The next could be chasing a pod of crooked dolphins to see where they led you. And the next day you could be anchored off a secretive island, where talking in code won favors, passwords were required, and backstabbing was the norm. Ah, the freedom. But a cold dousing from the pier above brought Muggsy back to reality. He gave up on that life. One too many close calls for his aging bones. And unless you were a captain, well, your life was still not wholly your own. At least down here he need only answer to himself. Himself and these little gastropods, he mused while pulling up yet another mollusk-encased apartment, and sloshing it upon the wooden platform in front of him as he set to work. Oh, the rain was letting up. And behold, the sun was carving a path through the dark, chunky clouds in the distance. Muggsy shielded his eyes as they adjusted to the glittery surface that playfully bounced the sun's broken reflection, when a rather bright glint flashed across his face. Averting his gaze from the broad to the narrow as he looked down, and saw a small glass bottle bobbing up and down just below. Muggsy grunted. Being a Dorsey, a fish person, if you will, he respected the water in all of its forms, as this is where he was born. So, garbage, be it small or large, was not to be accepted. In fact, it was a recurring problem during his pirate-filled tenure, and one reason indeed why he never stayed loyal to one group for very long. Needless to say, he grabbed a nearby netted pole and fished the little refuge. And lo and behold, once it was in his grasp, there was more than meets the eye to this trinket. For the bottle was not only corked, but held a rolled bit of parchment within. Muggsy's interest was piqued. But first, he needed to finish cleaning this pot. So he gently rested it next to his lunch on a small shelf, then continued his work, all the while wondering what could be held inside. After many sideways glances, and the abalone were all clean and fed, he lowered the pot back into the water, wiped his hands on the inside of his rain jacket, then grabbed his food along with the bottle and walked over to the end of the platform. Here he was able to have a seat, dangling his legs over the side while the fresh sun bathed and warmed his skin. Taking a bite of his squid sandwich, Muggsy tilted his head and swallowed while looking over the bottle in his other hand. He tugged the inside of his cheek, then set the bottle down behind him and shook his head. I just want to eat in peace, he thought, as he turned his gaze out to the open water. Muggsy sighed, then looked down at the cold, slimy sandwich in disgust, and shoved the rest of it into his mouth before turning around to take in his ramshackle little operation, and then looked away while scratching the side of his chin. The thought of what may or may not be inside of this weathered glass bottle was setting ablaze that deep, buried sense of adventure within his heart. Did someone need rescue? Could it be a map of buried treasure, or a note of wishes and regret? Perhaps even something from someone he knew in his past? It was all too much to bear as that adventurous heat rose and mingled with his curiosity. Snatching it up, he looked over the contents again, but the glass was now too opaque to see within, and the cork was too decayed to pop. So he smashed it upon the wood boards and retrieved the small tanned parchment, unfurled the edges, held his breath, and roved his eyes over the messy scrawl of words. I found it. At least I think I did. One of the greatest treasures to ever hide in plain sight. A place unplottable, full of the grandest pieces of history we have ever known, buried jewels and wishes granted, or so they say. Seek out the blushing hens. They will guide you, but be wary. It is all too easy to become lost when obsession takes over your thirst for adventure and glory. I should know, for I no longer know where I am, and I feel something is hunting me. Now go! Discover what I could not. The quest is yours. Muggsy read and reread the letter over and over again. The blushing hens, he thought. With furrowed brow while biting the inside of his cheek, he pondered, and looked out to the sea once again, then back to the letter. The parchment felt more alive than ever as he rubbed it between his thumb and forefinger. That heat in his chest continued to grow, and he considered his little farm, the ropes and pulleys, the steady and calm work. But hiding in the dark under this pier, he felt angry with himself, and resentful at the calling for adventure. But he smiled, and then exhaled before folding up the letter and placing it within his jacket pocket. Muggsy stood, and stretched. Then set to hauling each cage of abalone, shucking them all from their compartments and letting them loose to the waters below. He would not be returning, no. Tonight, he would regain what he snuffed out, and remember what it was like to have the wind on his face, danger at his back, and a quest to quench his thirst for relevance. Our past doesn't always end where we leave them. Sometimes they're simply waiting for us to notice. But if you'd like to hear another, the Gathering Stone will still be here. Farewell for now.